Century 14 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
Welcome back to Tactical Tangents. This is Mike. This episode is brought to you by Drip Drop. Drip Drop Oral Rehydration Solution is an electrolyte powder that you mix with water. It was formulated by a doctor for quick absorption. I work in the desert, and it only takes a few hours in the heat, wearing body armor, carrying around a bunch of gear before I start feeling like crap and fall behind the curve in dehydration. Drip Drop keeps you in the fight so you can finish the mission and rehab for the next one. Go get you some at dripdrop.com or on Amazon, or ask your supply guy to find it for you.
And this is Jim. This episode is also brought to you by Dry Fire Mag. Ammo is getting hard to find these days, and you need to stay proficient by working your dry fire training. Dry Fire Mag solves the common and annoying problem in dry fire training of constantly having to rack the slide to reset the trigger. With this thing, all you do is clear your weapon, load the training magazine, and get to work. Check them out at dryfiremag.com.
So tonight I'm sitting down with Ross Hick. Ross is a buddy of mine, and we've got some mutual friends in common. If you guys remember John Johnston, he's been on the show before. He's the host of Ballistic Radio, and he also works with Citizens Defense Research, where Ross also works. And as a day job, he works as an adult probation officer and private firearms instructor, obviously with Citizens Defense Research, but otherwise an adult probation officer in real life. CDR, if you don't remember, we've talked about them a bunch. They've got some awesome courses, a lot of courses that you can't really find anywhere else. They've got the Armed Parent and Guardian, which is a really cool, I haven't gotten to attend it, but just philosophically, I really like the idea of the class. I don't know that anyone else has put the effort into stuff like that. John Johnston teaches a tests and standards class, which is really cool. And Ross actually has a class called The Psychology of Critical Incidents, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit tonight. We were at lunch one day, and the topic of emotional fitness came up. We were talking about this class, and the class that he teaches is very similar to one that I teach to police recruits. His is generally more aimed at the private self-defense crowd, but I teach one called The Psychology of Survival to police recruits in the academy. It's actually part of the post curriculum here in Arizona where I work, and it's a very similar subject matter. So, of course, we start nerding out on this stuff. We've both done a lot of reading on the topic. Neither of us are doctors or psychologists or researchers or anything like that. He's a probation officer. I'm a stupid cop. But we're passionate about this kind of thing. And so we talked a lot about it. And one of the things that we talked about was how a lot of people spend so much time preparing for the fight, right? And it's the combat skills, and they're not really preparing for the aftermath that's going to come with that. And this is an area that I talk to with police recruits in my class, and that is all the physical preparation for that fight is important. You definitely have to do that work, right? But there's two key links, I think, in the little chain of survival, right? One, obviously surviving the fight physically is one thing. There's the emotional fitness that also informs that preparation. And what I mean by that is, you go into a job like this, you're aware of your own mortality and the risks involved and all of that. And because of that, you're doing the work for everything that you hold dearly, right? And that's the preparation side of it. And then in the aftermath, this is where resilience comes in. And we know from personal experience and from research that the aftermath of a lot of these critical incidents, that's what crushes people, right? And often kills people, right? Usually through suicide or substance abuse or some combination of stress levels being so high that they start to suffer other health problems that are all a result of this kind of life that they've led or these critical incidents that they've dealt with. And ultimately that can lead them by itself to an early death. So that fight in the aftermath is also a big part of the emphasis that we have to think about beyond just winning the fight itself. So anyway, that's my long-winded introduction to this topic. Ross, thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me.
We've been hanging out a bunch and drinking some beers and some whiskeys, and we just can't get enough of this stuff. So we're like, we need to really put this in front of a microphone and get it out there for the world. So
good.
So when we first started talking about this stuff, emotional survival, emotional fitness, whatever you want to call that. One of the things that stood out to me about this conversation that we had initially was there's a lot of common threads that you and I have based on individual experiences. Like we've experienced completely different things, but those common threads that we've sort of struggled with in the aftermath of some of this have been very common. And that's something that is consistent across the board, right? Like the disturbances in sleep and all reliving parts of it. And all of that is stuff that is very well documented. But, when people experience it, whether they cope with it and recover or they continue to struggle, those common threads are there. And so in your case, Ross, you talk about a car accident that you were in. Is that a story that you're willing to talk about and share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I talk about it in the class. So usually how I frame it is so to describe my job before the car accident, as a probation officer, a lot of people think I work with juveniles or I'm working with DUI cases, stuff like that. And those do definitely make it to probation. But my specialty was high-risk offenders for more than 10 years. And then moving on to seriously mentally ill sex offenders. And to give you an idea just roughly of the cases I was dealing with, it was people who multiple offenses, fairly high-level stuff, and it was rough stuff. And
often here in the county that we work, that results in probation, which you would think is a little backwards, but
and that surprises a lot of people because they're like, well, I just assumed those guys were in prison, and yeah, they did go do prison for probably one of their charges, and then they come out on probation after that, supervised, and then there's paroles, a little separate, but long story short, basically, those were the kind of dudes I was supervising. And there were days where I had a bunch of close calls. I had dudes get, to give you a story right around this time of year from Thanksgiving, many years ago, I had a guy who came out who was on psych meds and he, unknown to us, stopped taking them. The homeless shelter he was in had assured us he was still taking them, but his behavior was just kind of all over the place. And he's only out for 2 weeks and he's staring at my gun in the holster every time I'm near the guy and hearing things that aren't there, seeing things that aren't there. So we're trying to get him help. We're trying to get him meds, but he's just, he's pretending to take the pills so much so that he's fooling the homeless shelter he's staying in. And, so I go to see the guy after 2 weeks of kind of being pretty worried about this guy. And I go see him on Black Friday in the morning and they're like, oh no, he's dead. Wow. He ripped a fire extinguisher off the wall at like 2 a.m, threw it at somebody, ran out the door. We called police. They tracked him down the street. He attacked him, jumped on top of one of them, tried to take their gun. So they shot him.
Jesus.
And of course, the first thing that goes through my mind is, well, he's been staring at my gun for 2 weeks, so I need to get a hold of that department and tell them, yeah,
that you have some testimonial evidence,
some pertinent information. And so, stuff like that. And that's one example, but it was like dozens of times a year. And so to say that I had come to terms with having to possibly shoot someone in self-defense, no problem. I mean, I had come to terms with that being a reality, a possible reality at my job,
right,
long ago. And all of that is to say that that's the background to there I am driving along one night with a brand new officer in my passenger seat, and she had been driving most of the night, and getting late. We're headed back to the office. I'll drive on the way back, just rest. And driving down a road, and all of a sudden, 20 feet in front of my car, I see dude, and I had, fractions of a second. It was just frames in my mind of guy in the road. Next thing I know, he's in my windshield with glass all over me, like his head went in the windshield. And there was that moment of weird calm where as I'm stopping the car and trying to get over out of traffic a little bit, I'm thinking, there's nothing you could have done. Like, there was so little time, nothing. But you can still do something now. So what happens now matters. So I stop the car, tell my passenger, hey, call dispatch, tell them what's going on, call 911, jump out. I'm going to help the guy, grab my gloves on the way out. And I find a guy who reeks of alcohol, unconscious in the middle of the road, big head injury, big gash, and he's got this weird reflexive breathing going on. And I'm a guy that's prepared, so I rip my ankle medical kit off that's got my tourniquet
Nice.
and all that stuff.
As you should.
Yep, throw it on the ground, and then I'm looking at it for a second, and I'm like, man, I got nothing for a head injury in here. And I'm like, okay, so now what? Well, he's breathing, so then I go back to, it used to be an EMT long ago. And I'm like, all right, so super basic. He's breathing. Let's keep that.
High five. Yeah,
let's keep that going. Let me protect his head. Let me try not to get us hit by a car. Let me protect his airway. And so I kind of go into that mode. And at that point, other people had seen it, stopping, jumping out, handed somebody my flashlight, said, hey, try to keep us from getting hit by a car, please. And I basically, so fire department shows up minutes later, scoop the guy up, off he goes to the hospital. And I'm left with a very small pool of blood and some bandages and, this nothing sitting on the ground. And then the world descended on me, right? So then I have police, I have other officers from my department. And that whole investigation, the way I describe it was, you get isolated, and they were super cool. They let me keep my gun. They let me, nobody told me to go sit anywhere. They just said, hey, just go over here. Don't talk to anybody. Chill. We'll be with you in a bit. So I had basically the best possible outcome that probably most people involved in like a shooting aren't going to have. On the civilian side, right? Just,
Right. Self-defense type of incident, if it were such a thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so despite that, what I try to describe was that anybody who's been through that process, that investigatory process, where there's a potential fatality, which I should mention. So they got him to the hospital and the news came back that he was brain dead, which then interestingly, many months later, I found out that he was eventually released from the hospital. So I don't actually know in what state.
Yeah. I was not expecting that outcome though.
Right. Yeah. And this is after I had been told, no, he's gone, and lived that reality for months. And so they told me basically risk management said, don't look into it. And I was like, okay,
thanks a lot.
So I didn't. And many years or, months later in therapy, I had brought that up as like, hey, is it weird for me to want to know? Is it weird for me to want to find out those details about how he's doing? And I was told, absolutely not. It's perfectly normal.
Yeah.
But there wasn't really a way for me to do that at that point. So I kind of let it go, and I never did find out what happened. And so what I took away from that at the moment was I felt very out of control all of a sudden, very isolated. Now I'm stuck.
It's like you really want to know this thing, but no one is there to help you or to tell you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I see the helplessness in that where I want this thing, and you're asking the question, and everyone's like, not only they're saying they don't know, but they're saying they're not going to find out.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. I could see that.
And I'm standing there, and they're interviewing everybody else before they interview you, right? So they're interviewing everybody else, and you're isolated. You can't talk to anybody. So you're sitting there thinking, man, I wonder what those people are saying. I know what I did. My passenger knows what happened, I think. But
well, she was asleep. But.
Right. But does anybody else? Is someone going to say something
Right.
that doesn't quite line up? And now I'm going to have, And so you're just sitting there wondering what's going to happen. And, eventually I started kind of piecing it together from what I was overhearing that like, no, they were getting the right story and I had kind of the right idea. And long story short, I went home that night, and basically was told, hey, there's nothing you could have done from everything we're hearing and seeing. And, you're as okay as you're going to get on our side, on the legal side. And so then I just had to deal with everything else, all of the emotions, all of that did actually happen. Now I got to process it. And I felt fine, relatively.
Sure.
And I go back to work, and then 2 weeks later, I take, they give me 72 hours off, whatever, and I'm fine. I go back to work, and I'm sitting at my computer, and 2 weeks later, I'm just getting angry, like angrier and angrier for no reason that I can put my finger on. And it got to the point where, like, the way I described it is I felt sleep deprived, like I had nothing left in my tank for the little stuff. And stuff around the office that would not have bothered me was just eating away at me.
Too much.
Building. So I stand up and I walk down to my boss's office, and thank goodness I had the best boss in the world at the time. And I walk in and I'm like, hey, I got to go. Like, I need to go figure this out, but I can't be here right now. And he was like, sure, no problem. You go, you tell me what you need, I'll make it happen. Which was a rarity.
Yeah, I was going to say that's something underappreciated for sure.
And I found out later how rare that was, and yeah. I can't overstate how awesome that was.
Yeah.
And so so I went and got some help. I went and looked into a therapist who kind of specializes in first responder stuff. And she was very helpful. And eventually I got into EMDR, which was, at the time, I had no clue about.
And that EMDR is a psychology. It's a therapy modality, I guess, and it's eye movement desensitization. Something.
Yeah, I have it written down.
I feel
somewhere.
like I can Google this really fast. Eye movement desensitization. Here, I'm going to look it up.
Yeah.
It's eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. There you go. And it sounds very hokey. Because it involves basically these blinking lights that go left and right that you follow with your eyes while you're retelling a story, kind of re-experiencing some of that. And the idea is to the way that one of the therapists that I've seen described it, and I haven't done EMDR myself, but I know a lot of people who have, and they've said it's very, very effective. And one of the things that she said is, I think that's like the most useful way of describing it. She said, you know how if you're driving on the freeway and then you're in an area that you don't know, and you get off the freeway and you're looking at directions on your, on Google Maps or whatever, and you turn down the radio. It's like, it doesn't help you see better or drive better to turn the radio down. But the idea is your brain starts to tune out the things that aren't important.
Yeah.
And when you're focusing on cognitively trying to process navigating in an unfamiliar area, the radio is just, it's literally noise, right? And so like your brain is trying to like reduce the noise. And so this is basically, if I understand it correctly, something where giving you this other task of watching these lights as they move back and forth help your brain discard the unnecessary stuff.
Yeah.
So that you can untangle it, right? Does that sound about right?
That sounds about right. And my experience, the way it's a little different for every person, but how I describe it was almost like a, I don't want to say guided meditation quite, but like that's the closest thing I had.
Like an imagery kind of
to it. Right.
Yeah.
And so it was like, it's paired with cognitive behavioral treatment, normal stuff. And so it doesn't work for everybody, I guess. Yeah. And she told me to kind of go do my own research on it before we ever got into it and see if it was something I wanted to do first off. And, basically from what I read, worst case, it doesn't work any better than regular cognitive behavior, which it's already paired with for most people. So there's nothing to lose. It's not going to hurt you.
The only other thing I heard was, again, from the same doc that was explaining it to me, was as far as a negative, a con, right? If you're looking at the pros and cons, one is the intense feelings and emotions that come with re-experiencing some of that, which is what you're there to try to process. Right. But that can be very intense and uncomfortable. And, you go out of there feeling probably, I would imagine, pretty drained and just exhausted at times.
Well, what's interesting for me, and I again, it worked for me, so I don't know what the experience would be on the other side of it. But the way I describe it was, you start talking about the experience of what happened to you. And you do that while you're doing, you do that, and then you do the EMDR. And what happened to me was I'm an overthinker, right?
Same.
Right. People who do our jobs usually are.
Yeah.
And, we're sitting there thinking of all the ways something can go wrong. And it stopped that. I could not. I tried.
To overthink it.
Not at all.
Right.
I sat there, and all I was left with while trying, because therapist says, all right, so now, tell me, describe your senses. What are you smelling? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? All this stuff. And all of a sudden I couldn't. And all I was left with was just the raw feeling, the emotion that had been buried underneath all of that thought and all of that racing, mindlessness. And what that allowed me to do was, first off, there was nothing else to think about except the emotion.
Yeah, you've discarded everything else,
there's
right?
Nothing else in the room.
The idea, right?
And
back to the analogy. I think.
Exactly. So it's kind of what you were describing. Yeah. And for me, it was like, oh, and what was interesting is you do it a bunch of times, right? So you'll do it for a positive thing in your life, right? Which for me was like hiking in the mountains was my safe space.
It's the desensitization part, right? Reprocessing. Yeah.
And you do it and I was left with this overwhelming feeling of peace. And the whole point of that was, okay, well, remember that and, hold on to that. Hold on to what that feels like. And when we discussed the event, I go through the regular emotions I'm going through, and then we do the EMDR, and oddly, first I'm left with this overwhelming sense of I don't call it despair, but like, despair is as close as I could get to it, I guess. Certainly not a positive emotion. We do it again, and the second time I have a totally different experience. The emotion I'm left with, the only thing left in the room, was this overwhelming sense of love, which sounds super fuzzy, wuzzy, but I promise you I'm not. And what it was all of the people who showed up for my department and everyone who showed up to try to sort this thing out.
Right.
And I won't say they were all there to help me specifically, right?
But they were generally helpful.
But a bunch of them were, and yeah, they were certainly helpful.
What's that quote? There's a famous quote. It's like, I don't know, Maya Angelou or something. She says something about looking for the helpers.
Yeah.
Like whenever things are going bad or the world's falling apart, like look for the people helping.
Yeah.
And you'll always, this is one of those things about, one of the big things about therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, is about framing.
Right.
Right. And there's a book called The Gates of Fire, and I'm not going to even try to go through the quote, but it's basically a novel about the Battle of Thermopylae, right? The Spartan battle that the movie 300 is based on. And essentially they talk about how, don't despise war. There's a quote in that book. It talks about don't despise war because it brings out everything that is noble in a man. Mm. And in a similar sense, when tragedy strikes and you look around, you'll see people who are doing all of these things to help. And like the framing side of that, if you think about cognitive behavioral therapy, a lot of it is, how do you look at this situation? Do you look at it as this terrible thing, this dark, evil place? Or do you look at it as an opportunity where, you know, all these people come and they help this person or these people in these circumstances? And if you look for that, like it's a little bit of optimism versus pessimism, I guess. But and it's not to take away from the tragedy, right? No. It doesn't mean that a bad thing didn't happen, right, but there's a positive spin, right?
And that meaning was important because without, you know, the way I feel about EMDR is that it sped up the process, which is kind of how my therapist described it as well. It's like
untangling.
We're getting there sooner. We're getting through the processing phase sooner. And it certainly helped me do that. It cut through all of that overthinking, all of that stuff in the past, or, you know, in the background, and left me with nothing but the raw emotion that I had to process through. And that, I can tell you from experience, would have taken me a whole lot longer to get to. And that allowed me to start working on that and start seeing what mattered and finding that meaning. And that's something that I've talked to a lot of people who have been through similar situations, and finding meaning has come up again and again and again.
Yeah.
And what I try to stress for people is, you know, first off, I did not do a lot of preventative care leading up to this event. And I think I'm not alone in that. I was burning the candle at both ends and then throwing the whole thing in a fireplace on top of it. And I could do that because I was younger, right? I thought I could. And after the event, one of the conclusions I came through a lot of work was, man, if this hadn't happened, it would have been something. It was a matter of time. And the way I had kind of set myself up was unsustainable. And boy, it would have been a lot easier if I had done some of that work ahead of time.
Yeah. So a couple things on that. First of all, in the intro, I talked about a key theme that you and I talked about, which is a lot of people put the emphasis on preparing for the fight itself and not the aftermath. And this kind of speaks to the preventative, you know, the maintenance and the coping skills. And that is a big part of mental toughness and resilience, is being able to bounce back, because there are going to be bad outcomes. There are going to be failures and all of those things. And often the tricky part about this is often it's not the thing that you expect. Like, I have a close colleague of mine that I work with, and he teaches a class that deals with critical incident stress and trauma and this sort of thing. And he has a slide where he explains to these new officers when he teaches it about, he pulled his stats at one point from his career, you know, and he's got over 20 years on. And he's like, I've been to this many murders, this many, you know, child abuse cases, this many sex assaults, this many armed robberies, aggravated assaults, drive-by shooting. I've been to all this ugly stuff, and none of that really bothers me. What bothered him was he went to a car accident one time, or it was a car fire, and there were people trapped in the car, and they were screaming, and it was that helpless feeling of there's nothing I can do to help them.
Yeah.
And that's what got him, right? And he is a big advocate for EMDR. That helped him a lot, and he talks a lot about that and just generally dealing with your trauma, but also EMDR specifically. But the lesson in there is often it's not the thing that you expect, and so what you have to learn how to cope with now is not the aftermath of this specific thing, so much as the aftermath of anything.
Yeah.
Right. It's dealing with helplessness in general, right? Or that despair in general. And like, that is something that obviously when the big one happens, it's still going to be a fight, but hopefully you've learned some coping skills, like you said, along the way from smaller things that help you. Right. So I wanted to make sure I hit that point because, in the tactical fantasy that we all have about how like this guy robbing me at the ATM is going to get shot in the face 18 times.
Sure.
We forget about some of those things. And that feeling of hopelessness. I just can't imagine, some people in law enforcement or even just the self-defense crowd who have this vision of like a child or their family member being taken hostage, and that futile, helpless feeling of like, I there's nothing I can do about that right now. I've got this really cool gun and these mad skills, but maybe I just don't have a shot or whatever. And it's like, how do you cope with that? And it's like, well, there's no way to prepare for that really, but there's the little things leading up to it. So anyway,
and that was me. That was absolutely me in this situation. I had no parking space in my head. I had done countless hours of simulations and, all sorts of stuff.
Right. But not car accidents.
Nope. Never imagined having a tenth of a second, one frame in my mind of a guy going through my windshield and being like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I will say though, from the sounds of it, based on the training and the preparation and a lot of the things that you did, because it sounds like at the end of the day, you did bounce back, right? I mean,
eventually, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, whether you still have to work on things or not, sometimes it doesn't end, right? But you're here and you're healthy and you're doing, it seems pretty well. And I would imagine that throughout your training and other experiences, that you'd felt that feeling before, or you had faced challenges or something before.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I'd say that the cautionary example I can provide on this is the general background of being, like you said, having general preparedness. And that's kind of, you go into the training and there's a slide on that. All right, here, make sure you got an exercise routine and all this stuff and hobbies and things like that. And at the end of the day, what I would say, I wish someone had said to me early on was, hey, that's great. Do that stuff. But also this job is going to drain every ounce of empathy you have at some point. It's going to try. And a lot of guys and gals go the jaded route where they're like, nope, I'm just going to withdraw, not feel anything, whatever. And people in all walks of life can relate to this. I've talked to surgeons who do the same thing. Hey, I just got to work. Chris Seipert in CDR, he was a medic. He's done all sorts of interesting stuff.
Yeah. A special forces medic in the Army for those, just to clarify.
Yeah. He's
been there and seen some things.
He's a cool guy. And
I haven't personally met him, just interacted with him online and stuff, but
and describes the same thing. Like sometimes, I got to work on this piece of meat and not think about it. And yeah, that's great for getting the job done in the moment. Absolutely. And sometimes it's necessary. But if that's your way of coping with every aspect of your job, it's going to catch up to you, because all you have done at that point is removed any meaning from the stuff that you're going to experience. And you're still going to experience it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like whether you want to or not, some part of you is. And so removing that meaning is, again, my personal experience, that's death eventually. It's going to catch up to you.
Yeah.
So what I tell people is, if you can't find that meaning in what you're doing, or for whatever reason that's not possible, find it elsewhere. Go volunteer with kids, go walk dogs at the pound, go find some meaning for yourself elsewhere, and a lot of it, and maintain that. And the workout routine matters too.
Sure. And this is a big deal though, is that piece with yourself if it comes from your job, I mean, you could blow out a knee and you lose your job, and then what? Right. Like your identity was so wrapped up in that you don't, and the same thing can happen from a bad outcome at one of these critical incidents. Is like you felt like you were a good cop and you had a bad shooting, and you find yourself fired and maybe facing criminal charges.
Right.
And where does that take you? And so part of it has to just be with that understanding that, look, these are hard decisions and we do the best that we can,
right.
But I think that's important, is having that identity and meaning outside of just your profession. Like, it's got to be within you, that transcendence is something within. It's not from the outside, right? It's not the uniform that you wear. It's in your heart, it's in your head, whatever.
Right.
So,
and I screwed that up. So to me, that was the one deficiency I wish I had had going into this, was at that point in my life, I just didn't have a lot of that. And
I think a lot of us don't, though, when we're young. Like when we're young and we're new, it's just like, this is the best thing ever. Like, you put so much energy into it. This is what you're all about.
And I looked for it at the job.
Right.
100%. I thought, man, if I just keep throwing myself at the job, the meaning's going to come. People will give it to me. People will recognize, whatever. And that's unfortunately not the case, I don't think, for most people. And I certainly found that out. And okay, I wish someone had told me that early on. And if there's any piece of advice I can give to people in general, is maintain the hell out of that. So at the end of this, that whole experience, I came out of it as a net positive. I look at it as, boy, if I hadn't had this happen, as awful as it was,
there's growth.
I would still be living an absolute nightmare.
Well, and this is that framing thing, right?
Yep.
Like, because you can still go back and look at the things that, like, hey, this one of the things you said was, this thing happened, but like, there's nothing I can do about that, but there's something I can do now, right? And you can go and you can help and render care. Perfect example is like, right, when you look at those things, you see like, hey, this bad thing happened, but there's a lot of good things that happened, right? And kind of focus on that.
Yeah. And it ended up being, it's weird to say, and I had trouble with this when I went to therapy, where I was like, man, is it weird to say that it was actually a net positive, that it was actually a good thing in the end? Eventually, it took me a while to get there. Sure. And the therapist's like, no, that's kind of where we're trying to get.
That's
man.
growth.
Like,
yeah.
That's what we're trying to do. I'm glad you got there,
Personal growth is a big deal, and you have to, it's through experiences like this, unfortunately, right? It's through life experience. That's where it comes from.
Right. And that still feels a little weird to me today. Even when I look back at it, it's like this person's tragedy in their life. And I still don't know if the guy was trying to kill himself or it was just an accident. I have no idea. I do know he was pretty intoxicated, probably from the smell. I gathered that.
Not a detective, but
yeah. No. I mean, it was like, well, all right. So, but at the end of the day, it's tough. It's tough to reconcile that at times, where it's like, hooray for me,
There's opposing ideas in your head for sure. They're conflicting.
And those conflicting emotions were frequent afterwards, very frequent, where it was like, man, I feel one way, but also I feel the other way. And I'm not
probably
sure.
in waves of intensity, right?
Yeah.
Like sometimes they're really intense and sometimes it's just kind of
exactly
nagging.
And I had a lot of that. And, again, I felt okay for a couple weeks, and I had this idea that, man, I'm good. And if anything really bad was going to happen, it happened, and you see the movie waking up, at 2 a.m. covered in sweat kind of thing. And that didn't happen to me. And I thought, oh, all right, cool. And many, after the fact, after the getting angry and going home, at the time I was doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Nice.
Since become pretty lazy about it, but
same.
But at the time, I was pretty intense into it, and I happened to go to a gym that was mostly veterans and law enforcement, first responders, and I mentioned that, it's nothing. I don't have PTSD or anything. I'm just getting mad. Sitting there. Here's this experience I had, and everybody's looking at me, and they're like, "Dude, yeah, that's what you're describing. That's what,
yeah. It's part of the definition or something.
Right. They're like, yeah, that's what that was. And that's okay. And that was super helpful to have people around me who had an understanding of that on a fundamental level.
Those common threads, man, I'm telling you.
Yep. And then tried to choke me out because then I couldn't think about it anymore.
Yeah. Different experiences, but common threads. And yeah, maybe if you're on the jiu-jitsu mat, there's that overload of information. Your brain starts discarding what's not immediately important in those moments.
Yeah. That was helpful. That was helpful in a way.
Tap.
Yeah. White belt. Yeah. So I was like, oh, all right, cool. But that helped quite a bit. And actually since then, that gym has started a morning program specifically for that.
Nice.
For people to go to, which is pretty awesome. And I need to get back to it. But yeah, that was very helpful.
Same here. So all of this stuff being said, where did that send you? Because it sounds like this experience and the aftermath of this experience is what sent you on this sort of investigation of your own related to the psychology, right? All the stuff that you talk about in this class that you now teach, from my understanding so far, was more or less the result, and probably from other things as well, but largely this investigative project that you did as an extension of this to understand it, right? Is that more or less accurate?
Yeah.
Can you... So of all that research that you did, can you kind of summarize some of the key themes and
Sure.
where you looked and what you found?
Yeah. And I wish I could say it was like a journey of one direction and
continual
success.
Yeah, no, that's not how that works.
Yeah, not at all. So anybody listening
I've been there.
got that idea too. But it's definitely pulling. It's funny. Sometimes you'll realize that like stuff from way the heck back has an impact and a relevance to what you're doing. And for an example, when I was going to college, I was part of a psychology research experiment, and granted unpaid, like intern kind of stuff, so nobody special, but it was all about relationships and specifically breakups and why those impact people so hard and emotionally and physically when you're not gonna die, right?
This is
but it feels that way.
So this is actually something that I've had to deal with in therapy at one point.
Right. Me
so
too.
so I learned about attachment styles and dealing with some like marital issues and stuff.
Right.
And one of the things that my doc talked about was in terms of the relationship being threatened, right, is the anxiety that caused essentially a sympathetic nervous response, a fight or flight response, right?
Yep.
The anxiety that it caused was irrational. And it was irrational because your brain is telling you, it's triggering these survival mechanisms.
Yep.
Right? Your brain is saying this is a threat. We're going to die.
We're going to die. There's a tiger over
and
there.
like, you're not going to die if a relationship ends.
No.
But the primitive part of your brain doesn't get that.
Doesn't understand it all.
Right? And that, like, it's so funny that you bring that up. Like, that's been a very real thing that I've wrestled with in recent months. And so again, it goes back to the common threads, different experiences, but common threads. It's very real. This is Mike, and I just want to jump in real quick to announce our new partnership with Brink Drones. Brink has created life-saving capabilities in a drone that can break windows, fly into houses and confined spaces, and even crash into things and stay in the air with advanced pilot assistance that does not use GPS. Brink drones are built in the USA. It has night vision and IR that can function in blacked out and zero light conditions. It can flip itself back over, and it is a flying cell phone with two-way communication and a live video feed. It can even carry and drop off items for hostage negotiators with the payload feature. Brink has a really cool and compelling heritage that came to be after the 1 October mass shooting at Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas, and they are committed in their mission to leverage technology to save lives. And I can tell you firsthand that their drones will do just that by flying into places that are too dangerous to risk human lives. If you work in public safety, your agency needs to see what this drone can do. Go check out Brink Drones at brinkdrones.com, or feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to tell you all about them. Again, that's Brink, BRINC, drones.com.
And I think that's something that even if someone hasn't experienced a shooting or a car accident or something like that, almost everyone has experienced a relationship ending. And so in this research project, it's centered around a book, and you can go find the book. It's horribly boring. It's written just, it's tough. But the subject is fascinating, and it's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And that's the question, which is, okay, so if you're a zebra who has to struggle to survive every day and has predators and doesn't have a whole lot of defense, right? Why don't wild zebras get ulcers from the stress of just living? And yet you and I do.
Because we have these stupid emotional brains.
Right. And the answer, and I'm going to vastly undersell this. I'm just going to summarize it. So, go do your own research on it. But kind of like you described, right? The part of our brains optimized for, oh my God, there's a tiger over there, do not understand modern life. They do not understand it. It does not, the HPA axis does not understand bills. It does not understand retirements. It doesn't understand relationships ending. It understands tigers and
bears and lions
and
shit.
other stuff like that. Right.
Yeah.
And at the end
saber-toothed tigers,
right.
Specifically.
And the problem is it is necessarily fast. Because it has to be.
Right.
If it weren't quick, we would die.
Logic is too slow.
It has to be
reactive.
Yep. Immediate and stupid, and it would rather err on the side of overreact than underreact, right? Because if I miss the tiger, I die. If I think that bush over there is a tiger and it turns out not to be a tiger, okay, that sucks, but you're going to live till tomorrow.
If you think about the fight or flight responses, those are both
right,
legitimate options.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, you can choose wrong, but generally speaking, fighting or running away are both viable choices in survival scenarios.
And doing nothing when it's actually a tiger kind of sucks.
Right.
And so all of that's great if you're a wild animal, if you're a zebra. The problem is the zebra has this response maybe once a day, maybe twice a day if it's unlucky. And it's over pretty quick. It's either dead or it's not. And it does not have a big cerebral cortex to sit there and play it over and over and over again and think about existential threats.
They don't have the cognitive processing, the short-term memory.
Yep. And we do. So we have all of these systems, and then layered on top, we have all of these other things that are great for planning, great for thinking through scenarios, visualization, all the stuff that makes us amazing as humans. But when it comes to this negative stuff, our brain does not understand. The parts of our brain that are involved in this do not understand. And so we are having this reaction over and over and over again throughout the day. And it changes your brain. It physically enlarges structures in your brain and makes it easier to, I don't want to say overreact, but overreact, right? And activate that HPA axis. And so what we end up with is we are now associating bills and retirements and breakups and all this stuff with, oh my God, there's a tiger over there. It's going to kill me. And in a small way, but it's a similar stress response physiologically. And obviously that has horrible impact, because if a zebra had 100 tigers or 100 lions trying to eat it every day, it probably would have an ulcer, or, it'd be dead. But if it could survive, it'd probably exhibit a lot of the stuff we do. And so what do you do with that, right? And
real quick, you've used the term HPA axis a couple times, and I just want to reiterate what that is for the audience.
Yeah. So hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Basically,
there will be a test at the end.
Oh God, there's a tiger over there. I need to do fight or flight response, series of systems. And it's shorthand for fight or flight is kind of how you can think of it. And at the end of this, what do you do with all of this, right, is the question. So, because all that's great.
Yeah.
How do I apply it? And that's where it gets sticky because nobody quite agrees on this. But how I look at it is we know that our brains are optimized for this and it's fast, right? So if you read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, he calls them System 1 and System 2. Similar concept where this reaction to the tiger is way faster than anything you're going to cognitively be able to do to catch up. And you will catch up eventually, but it's probably too late at that point. So where the power for me comes in from our cerebral cortex is planning, right? Is visualization, stuff like that. And it's the ability to steer ourselves towards experiences that will help.
Yeah.
And some of that is finding that meaning, right? And steering yourself towards therapy would be a good idea if you're experiencing this. Overreactive HPA axis, that's a good idea. And I would just caution people because a lot of the advice I got was, well, just rationalize it, right? Just sit there and think about it. Man, have you ever tried to rationalize an emotion?
That's actually one of the questions that I have to ask you, but I want to reiterate part of what you're talking about here, which is a theme that we've talked about a lot on the show is about the decisions that you can't learn how to make in a PowerPoint, right? Like the shoot, no shoot scenario is a primitive self-defense type of thing. And so through imagery and rehearsals and training, you can program your response to that thing a little bit behaviorally and how you process that. Like you can condition that stuff, but it's not something that you have time to like sit down and make a pros and cons list for.
No.
Right? Like that's too slow, right? And so when you go to these training courses that some people put on and they have these PowerPoint classes that explain all the stuff about like, oh, active listening and you have to just show empathy for people. That's all legitimate when you can communicate.
Right.
But like if someone's got a gun in their hand and they're standing at room distance, like you don't have time for that, right? In a lot of cases. So along those lines, you talked about like putting yourself in those scenarios that, you know, you mentioned finding meaning. And this is why I say that being introspective and having that talk with yourself can inform the discipline and the training and the hard work that you put into this, because it is hard work.
Absolutely.
Right. It is not something that just happens in a vacuum or in a bubble. It's something that is a product of a lot of repetition and getting outside of your comfort zone and experiencing stressful situations, like learning how to cope with some level of that fight or flight response.
Yeah.
Like you don't learn that in the classroom.
No.
Simunitions a little bit, you know, the jujitsu mat a little bit. Yeah. Those are the sort of scenarios where self-preservation become a factor and you can experience some of this. And now you can start to learn how to switch on the cognitive part of your brain and think through problems where applicable, but also more importantly, program the solutions that you need, right? Like that's the key. So it hits another theme. If there's any like commanders or executive leaders in public safety or the military that are listening to this is why you have to actually get your troops or your officers or whoever out in field conditions, learning how to make these decisions, because it doesn't happen in a classroom.
And on that note, I would say one of the larger themes I've come across from management in general is, man, if we train people to do this stuff, say jujitsu, whatever, they're going to just use it all the time.
Yeah.
And I've
heard similar things.
Opposite experience, which is the guys who are good at that stuff have that in their back pocket and know it. And, you know, that they can go to it if they have to, but the confidence of knowing that it's there in your back pocket makes you not have to go to it. And earlier than it's needed, right? And it gets you, like you said, on the mat, you know, getting crushed by a person, which if you've ever done Brazilian jiu-jitsu, you know that's your life for a while.
Yeah.
And
it's called being a white belt.
Right. And if you stick with it long enough, everyone will have the experience eventually of realizing I'm not dying. My body is telling me I'm dying.
But you could fight through it.
I can't breathe. I'm going to die. But you can.
But you can breathe. Exactly.
Can.
Yeah. You just don't feel like you can.
And that's it. Right. And that's a moment, right? That's one of the key learning points where you're like, oh, okay, now I have some options. And then, of course, you lose because you're a white belt. But you build on that. It's a foothold. And I think if there's anything I can communicate, and I have tried to leadership out there, it's that train your people. There's no excuse not to.
Right.
If you're afraid of them leaving, yeah, they're going to do that anyways. Right. So train those people and give them a reason to stay. And also, you will see benefits in areas you did not realize. You will see people probably using less force than they would have otherwise had to because they have options and they know they don't need to.
Well, and a key is you get buy-in.
Yeah.
Right? Because people feel like they're actually getting somewhere.
Right.
And one of the big things related to that is, and it speaks to all of this, but especially when it comes to especially in terms of building mental toughness and resilience, or whatever you want to call that, having a growth mindset.
Yeah.
And putting people in scenarios and situations where they have to kind of fight through something and work through it, and then they overcome. And they see like, oh man, I can do this, right? Like I've been getting smashed for however long, and then you finally get that first sweep. You know, you get out from underneath some dude and you're like, oh,
yep. I still remember.
Got him. Yeah. Like, so that having that growth mindset is a big deal. And so one of my favorite examples of this is, as a firearms instructor, one of my favorite things is dealing with remedial shooters.
Yeah.
So we have cops come out for in-service training. They have to shoot their qualification, and you get someone who fails their qual.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh my God, I'm a terrible shooter. I'm bad at this. They have this attitude of like, they're just in the gutter, right? Because they just feel defeated or whatever. Like, I love working with those students because it's such an opportunity to be like, nah, dude, you got this.
Yeah.
Let me show you how you know you got this.
Yep.
And then when they can flip that switch and they come out of it like, I don't know why I was thinking like that. This wasn't that hard. You know, it's a teaching challenge, right? As an instructor, it can be a challenge to break through those barriers. But that's like the art of being a good instructor.
Oh yeah.
Is like, look, I already know how to shoot, right?
Yep.
It's conveying that.
That stuff feeds my soul.
It's conveying the expertise that I have to this other person. And so much of that is in their own outlook on themselves. Yeah. And so developing that growth mindset is a great example. So earlier you talked about you got a lot of bad advice. I'm curious not only what bad advice you got and why it's bad, but also what good advice did you get?
Yeah. And so when I say bad advice, it was well-intentioned.
Sure.
But it was kind of similar to what I think a lot of people get at smaller agencies, which is, you get a slide or two.
Right. Getting back to the PowerPoints.
Yep.
Yeah. Because you got to check that box. They need those names on the roster.
You got it. And it's a lot of that stuff we teach from kind of a business standpoint, like you were talking about. Oh, we make the matrix and we lay out all our options and stuff. And another really interesting book that John Johnston turned me on to, which I would recommend people to check out if you're interested in learning and kind of how people learn to make high-level decisions in very, very short time spans. And there's a lot of books out there for this. I know you've read more than a few as well that I picked up. But this one is called Sources of Power by Gary Klein. And that sounds...
Dang it. I was going to take a guess.
Yeah.
I would have been wrong.
Oh, and I probably know the one you're thinking of too, but
I was going to say The Inner Game of Tennis.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've heard that one.
Yeah, and which is there's a lot of in the realm of human performance as it relates to survival related skills. You can take a lot out of sports.
Yep.
Because so much money and research has gone into successful sporting, sports ball performance, which is not really my thing, but I get into it for this part of it where it applies to human performance in these sort of scenarios.
Yeah. And it's funny because I mentioned this in my classes a lot, which is like in the shooting world, we try to reinvent the wheel a lot, where we're like, okay, we have to start from scratch.
This isn't football, so therefore, it's like, well, hold on.
And it's like, okay,
people are people, though.
People have probably done this, elsewhere, and so absolutely, and that's I have heard that title more than a few times, so I need to check that out.
Yeah.
But Sources of Power is interesting because it touches on kind of what you mentioned, which is that, we teach a lot of this stuff from a business standpoint on PowerPoints about, okay, we make the matrix, we lay out our options. And what Gary Klein found was, and he was a researcher who was doing this for all sorts of contracts for military and law enforcement about 20 years ago. And he looked into pretty high level incidents where airliners got shot down, stuff like that. And why that happened and how do we keep that from happening? And what he found was we teach it stupidly. We teach it from this standpoint of laying all these options out. And the only people who actually do that, he found in practice, were the novices. And they would lay out all their options and then have a time crunch and go, oh God, and pick one. And it was more or less luck whether it worked out or not. And then there were all sorts of implications from that.
Sorry to interrupt you, but this is a good anecdote for this is Dr. Tang. He's the head trauma surgeon here in the town where I work. Right. And he's been on the show before. And one of the things, he participated in a study they did a while back about how experts translate information to novices. And in their case, it was talking about surgical airway, doing a crike, right? Basically. So you got to cut a hole in someone's neck to stick a tube down their trachea so they can breathe. Right. And he's like, there's the textbook that has the procedure, right? Step 1, prepare your, unwrap the, open the container, right? Step 2, put on gloves, stuff like that, right? So there's that. There's
body substance isolation.
Yeah, there's the procedure, right? The textbook procedure. Right. But then in real life, what the experts are like, well, here are the landmarks that I find on the guy's neck for where to make the incision. I mean, this is what I look for. This is how I feel, and that stuff's not in the book.
Nope.
Right? Because these guys have done it for real. It's like they read the book back in 87 when they went through med school. Right. But today, when they've done 600 of them or whatever, this is how I do it in practice.
Right. And that's kind of what Gary Klein gets into, which is, and it's an interesting book because it's well written and, no shade on him. Who he ended up mostly basing it on was firefighters because he could be around them and not die, but it was still a high risk situation that had a time constraint. So it's easy for him to study. And what he found was basically, and again, go read the book for the full story, but what the high level performers did was, first off, they didn't remember making a decision. When he started talking to them, they said, but I knew what to do. And it took him a while to figure out how to kind of parse that. And what he found was what they were actually doing, unbeknownst to them, was playing through a simulation in their head very, very, very quickly.
Yep.
And they were starting from, and even if it was a novel situation, which often it was, they had seen something.
There's components of it.
Right.
Right.
So they took a component that they'd seen before and then another component for the next step, and they built on this thing and played through the scenario. And that sounds slow. It's not.
It's slow in the making, but not in the moment.
Right. And we're built to do it. As human beings, we are built to do that.
Well, this is one of the things that comes up in that book, The Inner Game of Tennis, is how much training did you do to teach your child how to walk?
Right.
It turns out kids figure out how to walk on their own, really.
Right.
You could do little things to strengthen their muscles to get them in the right direction, but for the most part, they just start walking.
Right. Right.
And so embrace the brain's capacity to do that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And in terms of what you're saying, there's been a lot of research on police officers who have been in lethal force encounters. And one of the studies, a lot of stuff about perceptual distortions, right? Like what things they experienced and felt. And a common one is auditory exclusion. Yep. Like their gunshots sound like muffled pops. Their ears would listen, but their brain wouldn't hear. Yeah. Right. And so like the shots sound muffled. Things like tunnel vision, heightened visual detail or visual clarity in certain instances, a feeling of slowing of time, slow motion, even though obviously time is a constant. And one of the things in one of those studies was something like 74% of the respondents in this one reported acting or feeling as though they acted on autopilot. Mm-hmm. And it's exactly stuff like that. I don't remember taking my gun out of my holster. Yeah. I don't remember doing a reload. I don't remember fixing that malfunction. Mm-hmm. And those were the component skills that, draw and shoot was something that through repetition and training, like once it was time to play that script, I got that one down. Yep. Right. Like, because I have a modality for that. Yep. You have to still make the decision. Right. Right. There's still a perception problem. Right. But once you see it, the next steps, you just observe, act. Yep. Right.
And a great video I show in some of my classes is obviously our mutual friend, John Correa of Active Self-Protection.
Yep. Who's also been on the show.
He has a video of...
And his podcast host now, Mike Welliver.
Oh, yeah. Mike Correa, I think is his... that one's a deep cut. So he has a video that is a Seattle bendy bus. And I use it in almost every class because it's an interesting example of that, where there's a guy on his phone halfway down the bus, and in the background you see a guy pull out a gun and start robbing people of phones, and he kind of works his way forwards, and eventually he gets to this guy who has his phone buried in his face, and he sticks the gun in the guy's face, and that's the first time the guy notices, and he stands up, swings at the guy, some stuff happens, a bunch of people pile on the guy, and everybody misses it the first time. So I play it again, and what I tell people to do is watch the phone. And so this guy gets a gun shoved in his face, phone's in his hand, he stands up, swings, and then he puts the phone in his pocket while holding the gun in his other hand, trying not to die. And then once he's got the phone in his pocket, he swings at the guy. And then I asked the class,
drop your phone. I mean,
right. And so
this is a super common thing, by the way.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
If you're a cop listening to this, you need to practice that.
Yep.
Well, I mean, anyone should practice it, but cops especially, like holding your little notepad or your flashlight, like,
yep,
time to go to gun. It's time to go to gun.
Yeah. And so I asked,
and we're all guilty of that, by the way.
Yeah. And I asked the class, so why did that happen? And you get the usual, it's a $1,200 phone. And I go, okay, cool. I've done this 1,000 times in training. I guarantee if you asked that guy where his phone was, he'd have no idea. And he'd pat his pockets and go, oh, how did that happen? And the answer is, what does that guy do 100 times a day when he needs his hands?
Yeah, that's the behavioral side of this that people have to wrap their heads around is he didn't think about the dollar amount of the phone.
No.
There was no processing there.
No.
It is, what do I do with my phone? I put it in my pocket.
You got it. So I put it in my pocket is what he's done.
Because I've done that 1,000 times a day for like that's a perfect example.
And that's why I use it is that there's no rational person on this planet who would take time to put their phone in the pocket while they're holding a gun in their other hand, trying not to die.
Yep.
And he did. And the answer is there was no rational thought involved. He just went, oh, I need my hands. And so I use this as a counterpoint to what we all hear, which is that, oh, you're not going to be able to do certain things under stress. And the answer is, well, okay, fighter pilots do it. They can operate stuff under stress. How do they do it? Well, first off, they're not having to think about every single step. If they are, then that becomes impossible. But practicing what we need to practice, whether it's drawing a gun or doing whatever it is we need to do, that frees that up because then I don't have to think about every step. I just think, what do I need? And I hate to use it. I run that program basically, right?
It's a script. Yeah, for sure.
I run that script,
behavioral script,
and it happens. And I have experienced this. Mm-hmm. I know you have. Probably a lot of the listeners have, which is it. Sometimes I hear people concerned that, oh, this could be detrimental, right? I could accidentally run this script when I don't mean to. And I would say, in my experience, it's the opposite. It frees up my ability to pay attention to everything else because I'm not having to think about all this other stuff.
The key in that is like those component skills or scripts have to be developed to a degree of automaticity.
Right.
And people don't like that word, but like that's the thing, is that this is real stuff. And the analogy I use for this when I teach my version of this class is, which I think I recently did an episode about parts of this, so there's probably a lot of crossover here, but think about the first time you learned how to drive a car.
Right.
When you got your driver's permit, you took your test back in the day and you're a new driver and you had your parents sitting next to you. You got in the car, you checked your mirrors, you put your seatbelt on, like you're like, oh, whew, okay, that's what I gotta do. And then everything was very conscious, deliberate, intentional. You're driving down the road, you're processing where you're going to go, you're thinking about your next move, you're anticipating the actions of other drivers, and then what's it look like years later? You're eating a burrito, you got a phone in one ear, you're texting, you're driving with your knee, and really like you can there's a whole, we could go down the rabbit hole of like, can you really multitask? And the answer is no. But the point is, on some level, a lot of that processing happens automatically. Like you anticipate the light cycling from green to yellow to red, and that's just something that happens as sort of a background task without a lot of cognitive horsepower, right? It's just, you've interpreted that so many times that you got this, right? And that's a huge deal. So I want to, because I don't want to, I have a couple more questions. I don't want to run out of time. But I want to go through like the quick synopsis. What's the bad advice? What's the good advice?
Oh, sorry. So I
know we had a tactical tangent there. It's okay. It was a good one though, I think.
Yeah. So I think that the well-intentioned advice that I got was kind of what I mentioned earlier, which is that, have an exercise routine, don't drink too much.
Right. Get plenty of sleep.
Yeah. All things that are like, anyone who's done this job is like, okay, that's a nice thought.
Thing.
Yeah.
Okay, right
lose 20 pounds, whatever, All right. So what I wish people had told me was what I referenced earlier, which was, it's going to take work. People coming into this job need to be told that.
Applied effort. Specifically to this.
Yes.
Emotional wellness, emotional fitness.
Yep.
Separate from shooting, fighting, running. Yeah. All that.
If you're planning to just kind of figure it out after the fact or have it happen, you can do that, but boy, is it going to be rough on you.
Uphill battle. Yeah.
Yeah.
These are life skills.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
And it pays dividends elsewhere in your life. Like if you can wrap your head around this, you are way ahead of most people in general. And so you can look at it as, oh gosh, this is one more thing I have to do. Or you can look at it as, hey man, this is going to pay dividends later on when I retire and I'm sitting there and I got nothing better to do but think about all this stuff. So,
because you didn't die early from heart disease from all the stress and stuff.
Right. And so what I would tell people is what I mentioned earlier, find activities that have meaning for you. And specifically, I would recommend finding activities that allow you to have a positive connection with other people. And if you're like me, you just kind of flinched a little bit. That's tough, right? Especially in the jobs we do. We're like, yeah, screw that, man.
Last thing I want's more people.
Right. People suck. I want to go live on a mountain somewhere. Yeah. All right. But I would tell you that it's going to take effort, right? And try. And that doesn't mean you have to go, volunteer at the homeless shelter if that's not your thing, but find something where you can see some positives in people.
Look for the helpers.
Yep. Even if that's your fellow employees, right? So if that's something that you can do, hey, great. And if that's not going to be supported by your agency, okay, there's still stuff you can do. Maybe through your union, maybe through all sorts of other stuff. But look into that and maintain that. And then do all that other stuff they talk about, right? Don't drink too much and have an exercise routine and all that stuff. Don't shy away from therapy. I had a pretty positive view of therapy most of my life, thanks to my parents. I didn't look at it as a big stigma. And I still was that guy who was like, nah, I'm fine.
Well, we also don't tend to look at it as something that you need at any given time until it's too late.
Yeah.
We don't see it as a maintenance item. And you talked about preventative care, right? And I don't know what other bullet points you have on preventative care type stuff, but this is something that the growth that come out of incidents like this and the aftermath of these incidents is something that you've got to learn how to process, because it doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? Like you don't experience some horrible event and then like, oh man, I'm such a better person because of that. It's like you said, it takes work. It's applied effort. And learning how to process the smaller things before the big one it's like changing the oil in your car. It's like making sure that your tires are well maintained so that you don't have a blowout on the freeway. I mean, it's the preventative side of this is, it's okay to go have a checkup. It's okay to talk to the doc about these lower level incidents that, a lot of people in my line of work, they're more than happy to talk about the officer involved shooting, right? That like in terms of going to the doc, it's like, well, I killed a guy, so I'm going to go talk to this doctor. And it's like, okay, it's also okay though to go talk about like the dead guy that you saw that is sticking with you for some other reason, even though there's more attention given to officer involved shootings.
Yeah.
It's not a competition.
No,
it turns out. So go learn how to grow through that and process that stuff. And that's the life skill that helps you surpass the big one, right? When it happens. Because like we said earlier, you don't know what's going to get you.
No, and in a lot of ways, that vicarious trauma is worse because it sounds weird, but if you're a dispatcher, if you're someone who even just reads reports on this stuff,
it's a shared experience.
It's a shared experience. Your brain's really good at making that real for you.
Yeah.
And guess how much control you have over that? Zero.
Yep.
Because you're reading it or hearing about it secondhand, and you have no impact over that resolution. So how helpless are you going to feel? How much meaning are you going to get from that? And so, yeah, it may not be as intense, but you go experience that 100 times a day, you're setting yourself up for a very similar situation. And so if you're that person, I would suggest not discounting that.
Yeah. So back in the day, I went to a call where this 24-year-old woman killed her 2 kids and made a pathetic attempt at killing herself. And I'm not saying that, oh, I wish she would have died. I'm just saying that she shot her 18-month-old boy and her 4-year-old girl several times and then took a box cutter to herself and survived. And I was the first, I was one of the first cops on scene, and then as also an EMT, started rendering care to all 3 of them. And the kids obviously died, and then she went to jail. And one of the things that happened after that was I had a rookie officer who I was training at the time, and so we had a lot to talk about for his sake. But I also reached out to the communications people, and I said, hey, like, in case you're wondering, this is what happened.
Yeah.
And I gave them the story. And from that day forward, one of the supervisors in that communications section would invite me out to come teach classes to the dispatchers and stuff. And she would always introduce that thing about like, he told us what happened. And like, they don't usually get that closure.
Yeah.
Right. And it's something that, I mean, you have to recognize that it's not just, these people are answering the phone and this lady is saying like, I just killed my kids and stuff. And like, they're thinking like, oh my God, like they're entering this call and I remember reading the call when it came through and they dispatched it, and I read the call text and I'm like, this isn't real. Like
Right.
there's something not real about, like, this is bullshit. Like this is not what it says it is. And then you get there and you're like, oh, it's exactly what it says it is.
Yep.
And so giving them that closure and helping them through that was a bridge, a connection there that I built that has persisted to this day. In fact, just last week or the week before, so about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I went to a call where a 3-year-old girl died in the middle of the night. And I was the first one there, and they were doing CPR when I got there, and she was obviously deceased and there was no helping her. And so I pronounced the little girl and I told the parents, like I told the mom who was standing right there, that she died. And that's tough because I have a 3-year-old at home. And so that was a shitty night. Like I came home and I had a tough time, right? Yeah. Process through that, talk to my doc about it. All those things like we keep talking about are good things to do. But separately, I got an email from the call taker who knew me because her and I went through the FBI had a crisis negotiations course recently that we both went through together, like for hostage negotiators. They sent someone from the communications center there as a call taker to go sit through that class with us, which was cool.
Awesome.
And so she was in this class with me, and then, a week or so later saw that I had gone to this call, and she's like, hey, I saw that you went to that call that I took. I just wanted to check and make sure you're okay.
Right.
And so, we exchanged some messages about it, and, I told her I'm going to bring the dog in one of these days when I get a chance and let her meet. But the whole point is to some of the things that you've said about like those connections and looking for good in people, looking for people helping, and that vicarious trauma, like this thing affects them too.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, yeah, okay, I was there and dealt with the dead kid, but she heard the phone call and all of that, like empathy between people, like those connections, that's where you see a lot of this come together because that's the support, right?
Yes.
So anyway, I just had to share that because I think it's relevant.
That's awesome. And that's the kind of stuff that I love to see because I think we discount that a lot of times where it's like, oh, you're just, I'll tell you, I have seen people even just reading pre-sentence reports, which include detailed descriptions of the offense, and then have to interview the person, have similar experiences to dispatchers where they're like, man, I got no resolution and I had to experience this thing and I can't get it out of my head. On that note, I would tell people to, besides having those healthy escapes we talked about, spirituality, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily have to be an organized religion. For me, my spirituality was hiking in the woods, man, and getting away from people and smelling trees.
Yeah.
And that for me was what gave me peace. And whatever it is, that is a strength.
Yeah.
And so I would definitely encourage people to find that if they haven't already, and don't discount that. And meds are okay. That's the other thing that I always had a stigma about.
Can confirm.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Is that, if somebody broke their leg and they said, nah, man, I ain't taking ibuprofen. That's for weak people. We'd think that guy was a moron. And then when it happens for mental health, we're like, whoa, hang on here. You're on what?
Yeah.
It's got to end.
And you have to understand that, like, in my case, having gone down that path as well, it was because I wasn't sleeping.
Yep.
And that shit adds up.
Yep.
And you go a couple days where I'm not getting more than like 3-4 hours of sleep a night and stuff. And
Same.
you can't keep up with that. Like you're going to run into problems. And so at some point it's like, you go to your doctor and you're like, hey, like I need help.
Yep.
It's okay to ask for help.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you're going to become an addict. It doesn't mean that you're dependent on Look, like our brains are complicated things. Like sometimes we need help. Right. Yep. And, I took the meds for a while.
Yep.
They helped me. And then I'm not on them anymore.
Yep.
Like, I have them if I need them, but I don't.
Sure.
And so like that, it's okay.
Yeah. And same experience. Waking up at 2 a.m. sucks.
Yep.
And sometimes you need a little bit of help with that for a little while. So, yeah.
Well, anything else, Ross, that I know that we could talk for hours about this, but, and we have, frankly, like, yeah, to be clear, like we're trying to synopsize, like
was far-ranging.
several days worth of conversations that we've had at this point.
Yeah.
But any other big, psychology of critical incidents or emotional fitness or wellness, anything else that we haven't covered that we think is absolutely necessary here that we should hit
I think
on?
we pretty well covered it. I would just tell people to do your own exploration, do your own looking into this now, and it will benefit you. If you wait till it happens and then you're starting to try to catch up, it's a tough place to be.
I'm going to throw one more thing out there in terms of advice, and this is based a little bit on something I got from, again, one of the docs that I've dealt with over the years. She said there's actually a lot of research to support, and separate studies have confirmed this. So there's cross correlation and stuff. Tetris.
Oh yeah.
30 minutes of Tetris after a critical incident helps your brain process stuff. And it kind of goes to that EMDR, you're visually processing stuff and your brain can only do so much at one time. I think it's related to that. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know. But she always says, like, after a critical incident, she gets a notification, she'll call and she'll like, do me a favor, download Tetris on your phone and play it for 30 minutes or so. Apparently they've done the research in hospitals, people that were involved in terrible accidents. They've been using that as a treatment modality in the hospital, and it has reduced some of the post-traumatic stress. Now, that is the research. That is the doctor, the science. What I'm going to tell you on a personal level related to that, but not necessarily backed by any sort of research, just anecdotal, is something creative. When I started this podcast, as an example with Jim, one of the things that it was for me was an outlet for some of the frustrations and the challenges that I dealt with in my job. And I was like, I need to do something with this, and turn it into something positive. Right. And so, I started writing outlines for podcasts and I sat in front of a microphone and here we are, right? It's a creative outlet for me, but also, like, in my case, I play the guitar, not very well, but just some creative thing, some outlet. Because like you said, it's easy. People will like, oh, get exercise, have a hobby, get plenty of sleep. It's like, great, thanks. Yeah. But you're missing the point, though. If you stop there at like, oh, you need to go get a hobby, you need to go exercise. It's like, no, what you need to do is find something that you love and you're passionate about. Yeah. And like throw yourself at it. Yep. And like going back to your thing about like finding meaning in things. It's like, hey, like this, maybe it's photography. Like I'm not a very good photographer, but I got a fancy camera and I take some pictures. And when a good one comes out, I'm like, man, that's a really good picture that I took. Yeah, and like, you just enjoy that, right? It doesn't have to be anything earth shattering. And look, you're not selling it to the Times, right? Like necessarily. I mean, maybe you are, right? Like you're not winning an award because you're an amazing musician or whatever it is, right? Whatever hobby, whatever you're passionate about, whatever you find that you enjoy, find something healthy to throw yourself at and use that as a place that you can be like, you know what? I'm a lot of things, but this is also something that I love, whatever that is, right? And I think that goes a long way in those coping mechanisms. I mean, like I said, I'm not any good at playing my guitar, but if I have a long day at work and I come home and I play it for 10 minutes, I feel better. Yeah. And it's not because someone told me I should pick up a hobby. It's because it's something that I love doing. Yeah. So I think that's an important, like, kind of follow on to some of that. So. Absolutely. But the research says Tetris. So
I'm aware of that study. I think it was like out of Norway or
there's several now is the thing is they're like, they corroborate each other. Yeah. And that's like the big deal about it right now is that like, it's not just one. Yeah. They're like, no, this is real.
And as to the guitar thing, man, anything bigger than you that gives you meaning, absolutely. And that creative process is awesome.
Yeah. So, well, very cool. I think a lot of food for thought in here, and hopefully people get something out of it. We've touched on some of these surfaces a lot, but I think emotional fitness and emotional wellness is something that is becoming, like, people are getting better about it. Like, I know my department, for example, the place where I work, they've been making a huge wellness push with our new chief, and it's going well. I think it's a good thing. I think it's well needed. And it's for good reasons. Yeah. My department lost a few people to suicide just in over the last year and a couple months. one retiree and 2 active members of the department killed themselves. 2 of those 3 were friends, and the third I worked with. Not, we weren't bros or anything, but I worked with him. I knew who he was. But the other 2 were friends of mine. In fact, one of them was in my unit. And so this stuff is a big deal, and it's just as likely to kill you as the fight itself, right? The event itself. So you have to give it its due preparation and due treatment. So, Ross, thanks for being here, man. I appreciate it. This was an awesome conversation, and I'm sure we'll find some way of following up with it to do another one.
Absolutely.
So you live too close to not sit in front of a microphone with me again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Make sure you go check out Citizens Defense Research. Like I said, tons of classes. Ross is working with them, offering some of those. We've mentioned some of the other ones that they do. And also, if you ever find yourself convicted of any crimes and you're in our area and Ross is your PO, you've got a friend in him, right? So just stay off drugs and
don't make my life hard.
And don't look at his gun too much and those things.
Yeah,
and
please.
You'll be all right. So, all right. Anything else, Ross?
Nah, man. Thanks. It was awesome.
All right, guys, that's all we got for tonight. This episode is brought to you by Right On Optics. Right On is bringing you high-quality glass at a great value. I use and trust their scopes, binoculars, and red dot sights, and you can too with their unconditional lifetime warranty. If you ever have a problem with their gear, they will replace it, not repair it. Finish up your next build and keep a little extra cash on hand for ammo so you can actually go out and shoot that thing. Find your next optic at rightonoptics.com.
This episode is also brought to you by Manus X. We've talked a lot about the tactical fantasy on this podcast, and one of the quickest ways to break your tactical fantasies and actually improve your performance is by getting real feedback. One of the ways you can do that is with Manus X. You're not going to get better at shooting on your own. You need practice, data, and coaching. And you need to make the most of your ammo with good live and dry fire training. Manus is a family of training devices that tracks you while you train. It times and tracks everything you do in a drill and coaches you as you go. It is indispensable to taking your shooting to the next level. Go find them on manusx.com.
Don't forget that we put out new episodes on the 1st and the 15th of every month. If you like what we're doing, you can have our Patreon. Give us $1 for each new episode. That money's going to go back into bringing you good content. If you want to interact with us, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are at TacTangents. You can also email info@tacticaltangents.com. And one last thing, our Facebook discussion group. We've got a little group going on Facebook. If you go to the groups tab on our page, you can join it. We've got more followers on our page than we have in the group. So I know there's some of you out there following the Facebook page that are on Facebook that are not in the group. Lots of like-minded people in there. So come hang out with us. All right. That's all we got. Good talk.